I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
I am the greatest.
You want something, go get it. Period.
People say that I work hard, but the people that really worked hard were my parents. He would get back at 2 p.m., then he would work at the motel from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Then he would go work at the gas station he later bought from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. So the number one predictor of success is self-control. As I grew older, I realized that my time is more valuable than my money. Time is the only asset that you can't get back.
What's up, my fellow dreamers, doers, achievers? This is episode number 20 of the Dream Big & Co. podcast. And little disclaimer here, number 20 just so happens to be my favorite number, making it an even better episode than it already is, and having such a great person, an absolute master of his craft in many areas of his life on this podcast. But before we talk about his work and story, the quote for today's episode is a mere reflection of the conversation that you are going to hear. And the quote goes, "Suffer the pain of discipline or suffer the pain of regret." Suffer the pain of discipline or suffer the pain of regret. And focusing in on Shaan, having a microscope, focusing in on his life, I don't want to dull you down with too much information because there's a lot to cover and we dive into a good amount during the episode. But for a brief overview, Shaan really broke out into the scene when his company made it onto Shark Tank and got a deal with Mark Cuban. His company, Prep Expert, has since helped millions of students prep for the SAT and ACT, which are the tests that Shaan actually received a perfect score in. From there, he has gone on to write multiple books, start an online marketing agency, and he's currently striving for his residency in dermatology. He is constantly learning, growing, and raising the bar for himself, thus raising the bar for others. He embodies to the absolute max, to the absolute apex, improve yourself, impact lives. And like I said, underneath the surface, there is so much that goes into the framework and makeup of who Shaan is and how he developed his own success. So let's get rolling into episode number 20 with Shaan Patel. So here with Shaan Patel, thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate you doing this with your busy schedule. I know you have a lot going on, so
yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me to do the podcast. I'm excited to talk entrepreneurship and so many other things.
And for you, you're like a man of all trades. Like it's fitting that we're in Philly, maybe like a modern day Benjamin Franklin in terms of all the skills and practicality you have. But also another thing I wanted to say, congrats on your recent marriage.
Yeah, well,
awesome.
Engagement. Marriage is going to be there soon.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big life step for sure. And I've never been compared to Benjamin Franklin, but that's quite a compliment. Thank you.
And in doing my research, I saw you're really good at like pitches and speeches. So from the valedictorian speech to Shark Tank pitch to now that engagement pitch was very clever. So I commend you for that. It's really a testament to your speaking abilities and your creativity.
Thank you. Yeah, what's interesting is I think that the trait of a good entrepreneur is to learn how to pitch, how to write, how to communicate and speak. It's so important. I mean, I think it's important in all aspects of life, but particularly in entrepreneurship. A lot of times, every entrepreneur out there has an idea before it becomes a real business, and you have to sell that idea. And I don't just mean you have to sell that idea to investors, you have to sell that idea to your customers. You have to sell that idea to your business partners, obviously your investors. And so to be able to communicate that succinctly and attractively is super huge. And I think that's what luckily, thank you, said I have a skill for it, but I've worked really hard on it.
Yeah.
And I think it comes out in, I've written many books before. And I always try to think whenever I'm writing a book or when I'm doing a pitch, I think, what does the audience not know, right? Because I think a lot of people who are not the best at writing or communicating, what they get stuck in is their own mindset or perspective, and I never do that. I always think about the mindset in, for example, my Prep Expert SAT classes. I think about, what does a high school student know at this point in high school? How do they feel? How can I communicate this material to the 16-year-old who's on Snapchat all day, right? I'm not thinking about it as the 29-year-old MD, MBA that I am. I'm thinking about it as a 16-year-old. When I'm writing my book, Self-Made Success, I'm thinking about it from the terms of someone who is bootstrapping their own business and starting from scratch. I'm not thinking about it as a business owner who runs a business that has done tens of millions of dollars in revenue, So you have to always think about it from the perspective of your audience when you're doing pitches, books, everything in entrepreneurship.
And that's where you can give the most value to in investing in all of that. But going back to like the origin story, can you talk about like those humble roots? Because you have a unique story in talking to that fact and how that sort of fueled your drive and ambition to lead you to this like avenue of success and where you are at right now in life.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I can't take responsibility for any of the success that has come my way. It's really from my upbringing, as you brought up. People say that I work hard, but the people that really worked hard were my parents, So my parents actually immigrated from India to the United States with like $70, it was crazy. When they came, my mom even worked at Burger King. They had very little money or anything, and they really saved and worked 70, 80, 90 hours a week to, present a middle-class life for me and my brother. And what was an interesting move that my father did was, right when he had saved enough money he was actually a pharmacist in India and then became a pharmacist here. He had saved enough money from his pharmacist job. Instead of buying a house, he bought a motel, which actually was the smartest move, because if you, his friend went up to him and was like, why are you going to buy a house? If you buy a house, all you're going to do is pour money into it on renovations and things like that. But if you buy a motel, which is the same cost back then in the 80s, early 90s when he was doing it back in Vegas where I grew up, what would happen is the motel would be a revenue generator, and you could also live at the motel. Now, it wasn't the nicest motel. It was in urban Las Vegas where, there was a lot of gangs, drugs, prostitutes, all that kind of thing around. So it was a really interesting upbringing because I grew up in this environment surrounded by all these, it would kind of be like growing up in North Philadelphia, to put it in terms of where we are right now in sitting in Philly, right? And then, but I also grew up with a very strong family and educational background because my parents valued that so much from their upbringing in India. And so it was this dichotomy that I grew up with, which I think really set the foundation. So my dad would wake up at 5 a.m. to go to his job at the pharmacy at 6 a.m. He would get back at 2 p.m. Then he would work at the motel from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Then he would go work at the gas station he later bought from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then he would do it all the next day. And, that is kind of why I work so hard today in my multiple careers. I really saw it growing up as a child.
Yeah, I was going to ask where that entrepreneurial roots derive from. So I can see the bootstrapping and the hustling of both your parents, especially your dad, has played a huge role in where you are today.
Yeah, I think you've got to have someone that can serve as a model. Now, for me, I was very lucky. That model was in my home. My dad was the model of, he was a pharmacist, he was a motel owner, a gas station owner. So he was an entrepreneur in his own right, as well as a professional as a pharmacist. Now, that model, not everyone has a parent like that, and that's okay. Your model can be an entrepreneur, such as my business partner, Mark Cuban, right? Your model can be some of the authors that you read in books about, right? Your model, there are so many, easy ways to find great models now with all of the technology that we have. You can follow really inspiring entrepreneurs and Instagram accounts, right? So I think building that model and shaping that model helps you sort of shape your own life by having that.
There's no excuse not to use the blueprints now. One of the things I saw that really struck a chord with me was not sacrificing your time for money, or not replacing your time for money, and especially for the people listening, for the young audience at this young age, not doing that even more so. So was there a time in your life where that really played like a major role, where you had to take a step back and not go off of, first reaction and take the money at hand, if there was a case for that?
Yeah, I definitely think most people today, when they think about being thrifty or in terms of saving money, they never think about the time involved, right? And I used to be one of those people. I would try to save money at all costs. But I think the smarter thing to do as you grow older and as you have the opportunity, obviously, when you're bootstrapping, sometimes your time is worth less and you have to just put in the work and do it. But as I grew older, I realized that my time is more valuable than my money. Time is the only asset that you can't get back, right? You can lose money and you can make money back, but you can't get time back, right? So, for example, I'll give you an example. There was a flight that I was a few hours early at the airport just last weekend, and it was like 3 hours later, but they had a flight going 2 hours earlier, so it was like $100 to upgrade. Now, but the old me would have said, I'm not going to pay the $100, for the extra 2. I'll just wait the 3 hours at the airport. But I actually ended up doing it because I decided, what I calculated in my mind was, 2 hours of my time is worth more than $100. I value my time at more than $50 per hour, right? So I think entrepreneurs need to start thinking about how much they value their own time. Any individual out there, I would actually set a dollar amount on it, right? So I value my time at about $100 per hour, right? Let's say when it comes to work, right? If I can create an extra hour of time, I consider that $100. Have you actually, I'm just asking this as sort of like a question out there for the audience, but have they ever thought about what is the dollar amount on your time? And if you start thinking about it and thinking about life in terms of that, you'll stop wasting so much time.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I haven't even thought about that myself, so definitely take that as I go into the future. But with what you talked about in one of the 5 books you wrote, Self-Made Success, you talk about harnessing the power of Parkinsons Law, right? And with, getting your MBA from Yale, pursuing your medical degree right now, being a dermatologist, being a full-fledged entrepreneur, being on Shark Tank, getting a deal with Mark Cuban, and just like the nuances of life. Can you talk about how you use that Parkinson's Law to navigate through everything you're working on?
Absolutely, yeah. So for the listeners out there, Parkinson's Law essentially states that work will be completed in the amount of time that you allot it, right? So what that means is if you give your work a deadline of 3 months, it will take you 3 months to do it. If you give the same work a 1 week deadline to do it, it will take you 1 week to do it. Now, there's obviously some extremes to this and some generalizations here, but just to give people an example that everyone has gone through this, I'm sure you've been in an English class at some point in grade school and they gave you the entire semester to do a paper and you end up doing it either the night before or a few days before, right? And so the work ended up just taking how long you gave it. And so what you can do in your own life as an entrepreneur is apply the Parkinson's Law to your life to be more efficient. And I really dive into this deep in my book, Self-Made Success. But the idea today, what I do is I'll allot myself what I call office hours now. And my office hours are 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., let's say. And I have a ton of work. I'll have like 20 things to do in that 3 to 6 p.m time block, and I accomplish almost all 20 every single time. Now, I'm somewhat reasonable about what I'm trying to accomplish, but then it basically takes out the Instagramming, it takes out the replying to emails, it takes out all the minutia work and has me focused on the most important tasks that I need to get done in that 3-hour time block. And that makes me hyper efficient as an entrepreneur, and that's a very simple way that people can practically apply Parkinson's Law to their own everyday work.
Yeah, and that literally gets into my next point, which is something I heard, I believe it was from Tim Ferriss. He said, like, during this digital age, single tasking is a superpower in a way. So to be able to like starve distraction and not look at the social media and just focus on one thing and like set your own deadline to create that mindset is really powerful. But I wanted to ask you as well, while we're on the topic, what are like some really pragmatic like tactics you use to like starve distraction?
Yes.
In terms of maybe social media, all that.
Oh yes, I have so many. I actually feel bad for kids today because as a young kid, if I was 12, 13 years old, I would be so hard pressed. I didn't have, Facebook and Snapchat when I was 12, 13 years old to distract me. But what you can do, and what I still do, because I love social media, I love Instagram just like everybody else. But what I do now are here's a few practical tips. One is if I want to produce any content, I usually, as long as it doesn't require the internet, I'll turn the internet off. So what I mean by that is if I want to write a book chapter, if I want to write an article, if I have some financial sheets I need to go through, I'll turn the internet off, because if the internet is on, you are bound to open the web browser and check your email and go through YouTube or do whatever XYZ, right? So that's one strategy. Another strategy that I think is very effective is I will either put my phone in airplane mode, or I will put my phone in my backpack or bag and put it away from me so that I don't even have physical capability of grabbing the phone next to me. This is another tactic I use. I travel a lot, right? So my company, Prep Expert, is in Las Vegas, and I live in Philadelphia, so I travel across the country a lot. So it's 5-6 hour flights. I have always found that some of the most efficient time and the greatest value that I build is during 5 or 6 hour flights when I'm getting massive amounts of content done. Because what I do is I just don't buy the internet, and I load out all the files I need to do my work ahead of time, and I'm just doing so much work on that 5 to 6 hour airplane flight and get so much done. And I kind of laugh to myself because I see everyone else sleeping or watching TV, and it's like I just got an entire work day's worth of stuff done on this flight, and then I got to go, do either more work or enjoy the weekend or whatever it is at my next destination. So even if you're a frequent traveler, you can be efficient with your time.
Yeah, definitely. And then one of the pressing questions I had, because I'm super curious, a person like you, are there one or are multiple like life mantras you go by as of today, as you've gained all this experience, like 1, 2, 3, maybe more life mantras you have?
Absolutely. I have multiple life mantras that I've come to sort of tell myself and realize in life. And one we sort of talked about already, which was time is more valuable than money. It's so ridiculous when I see people who will spend hours and hours couponing, or they'll spend hours going from one store to the next store to do a return, and it's like you're spending all this time to save like $10 or something, and it's like you should be spending all those hours building value, doing whatever you need to do, or even building your relationships, but you shouldn't be wasting your time trying to save $10, because what you're saying by spending 2 hours couponing is that your time is worth less than $5 an hour, to save $10. So that's one thing. The other really powerful mantra that I like to live by, and this goes not so much for entrepreneurship, but more in my relationships, is change expectations to appreciation. So what that means is we all expect something from our relationship. So whether it's your significant other, in my case, my fiance, or whether it's my parents, or whether it's my friends, I expect, we all expect them to either make us happy or text us or give us a phone call or do whatever it may be to do X, Y, Z. But instead of doing that, if you change it to, I appreciate this person for being there, for having a divine spirit that gets to share life with me, that really can make you much more happy. Yeah. And then one that I talk about in Self-Made Success a lot is live in the present moment. Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, is a life-changing book for me.
I love that book.
It is so hard. I mean, you teach yoga, you were telling me, vinyasa, and that it's all about that, right? Which is, we are so wired to either think in the future or think in the past. It is so hard to tame the mind to be in the present moment. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it.
It's like taming a wild horse.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I don't think, even if you know about it and you understand it, you still can't practice it 90% of the time. So even if I can get a few moments during the day where I'm fully engaged in the present moment, oh my gosh, it totally changes your whole day, your whole mindset. One of the quotes that not my mantra, it's obviously, I think it's like Buddha's mantra, but it's like, if you live in the future, you're living with anxiety. If you live in the past, you're living with depression. And if you live in the present, you're living with happiness, And so to tame the mind and live in the present moment is so huge for me.
Yeah. And talking about living in the present, that is vitally important. But for you, as you look into pursuing other endeavors in your life, what plans do you have for what you want to work on in maybe a couple years out or a decade out?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question that I get asked all the time. Because my career is so spread out, right? On one hand, I'm a dermatology physician resident, so I have a medical career. On one hand, I'm the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, a test prep education company. On one hand, I'm the co-founder of ClearHat, a digital marketing agency. And then on one hand, I've written Self-Made Success and other books, so I'm an author. So, if I don't want to be confined to one role necessarily, and I love the question. I love when people ask me, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Because there's this one quote that I heard, which is, all 5-year business plans are complete guesses. And what I think about, I also think that's true for life career. All 5-year life career plans are complete guesses. So I can barely tell you how my life or career is going to be in 5 years rather than 10 years. But if I had to give you some structure to, how I'm going to put this all together, I think it's going to be a combination of a physician entrepreneur. So I would love to apply my experience in education and entrepreneurship and my successes there to a really life-changing and advancing dermatology company that's sort of tech-based, whether we use artificial intelligence, virtual reality, whatever it may be. But I think there's a huge opportunity in changing the way that dermatology is done. And so people ask me all the time, well, why don't you just start that company? Why do you need to go through dermatology residency and become a dermatologist and doctor? And there's two reasons. One is I do love being a physician. I love treating patients. So I think I'll always practice clinical medicine. But two, and the more important one that I think is the real lesson for entrepreneurs, is I want to put in my 10,000 hours. So you have to put in 10,000 hours. So for those that may not know about 10,000 hours,
it's like Rob.
Yeah, exactly, Rob, right? So Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. You have to put in 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. And what I really think about entrepreneurship in particular is, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to be putting in those 10,000 hours to become an expert in whatever you're doing. So for me, For SAT prep, at this point now, I've probably put in 10,000 hours between all the studying, writing books, creating courses, working on my company. I've done the 10,000 hours. But I haven't done 10,000 hours to learn dermatology and become an expert at it. So that's really what my residency is doing, is giving me those 10,000 hours. And that's so important, because if you're an entrepreneur who does not have, all right, so one of the biggest lessons in entrepreneurship, one of the biggest lessons in my Self-Made Success book is do what you know. And not only do what you know, but do what you know and you are an expert.
Take advantage of your strengths.
Exactly. Yeah. Because the last thing, if a young entrepreneur comes up to me and says, what should I start a business in? I know they've already lost. Because first it should be, what are you good at? What are you interested in? And let's say you don't have 10,000 hours of experience. Well, then go get it in something you're interested in. Like, I don't have 10,000 hours of experience in skincare, but I'm going to go get it through my dermatology residency, right? And so what was interesting is you mentioned Tim Ferriss. When I was in college, actually the same age as you, you're a sophomore in college. When I was a sophomore at the University of Southern California, I went to a speaking event with Tim Ferriss. He came. Okay. Yeah. And someone asked Tim Ferriss this exact question, which was, what should I start a company in? And that person was obviously clueless. And what he said was, well, do what you have knowledge in. And I was like, that's the stupidest answer. When I was a sophomore in college, I was like, that's the dumbest answer. Like, tell us what business. Like, I want to start a business. Like, tell me what I should start, And he was like, well, I started a sports nutrition company because I was a bodybuilder and I knew a lot about it, etc. And then, 10 years later, I realized, like, he actually gave us the secret sauce. The secret sauce is, no one is going to tell you, like, this is the industry you should start your business in, or this is the next big thing. What you need to do is find what you're interested in, become a super expert at it, because if you put in 10,000 hours to learn about artificial intelligence, whatever you're interested in, 10,000 hours to learn about virtual reality, you're going to find that opportunity for the business. You're going to be like, this needs a business.
You'll see that niche. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the same way I'm looking at dermatology. So I'm putting in those 10,000 hours. I'm seeing so many inefficiencies, so many business opportunities. And eventually I'm going to be like, this is the one I'm going to pursue because I put in the 10,000 hours. I know this front to back. I'm an absolute expert at it. So that's the secret sauce to how you find your next business.
Wow, I love that. Connecting the dots there. That's great. And then sort of wrapping it back in a way for this one question is, with prep expert, clear hat, and then you, whatever venture you do with dermatology and skincare, you really do care about education and providing value for others. And going back to, would you say, like you said, your parents instilled that like value of education and just giving without like much expectation?
Yeah. Education is the best asset I think anyone can have. And what's interesting is that in today's world of entrepreneurship, everyone says you don't need education, right? Everyone's like, what's the value of a college education? You don't need it anymore, etc., right? And I actually argue against that. I think with everyone it's so easy to learn information now on the internet, right? It's hard to differentiate yourself without education, right? Yeah, you go to Drexel, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to go such a long way in your career path, whether you work for a large company, etc. Because what's going to happen is everyone's just going to have either no education or a high school education. It's super hard to compete without that. And then the other thing is, what's interesting for me at least, is education actually taught me the discipline to be a good entrepreneur. By being really, really good at school, so the number one predictor of success is self-control. This is proven by a Stanford research study. They basically put like a few hundred kids in a room. They were like 5 years old, a few hundred 5-year-olds, one at a time, obviously, with a marshmallow. And they said, you can eat this marshmallow now, or if you wait 15 minutes, we'll give you 2 marshmallows. So only like 1/3 of the kids had enough self-control to not eat the marshmallow in that 15 minutes. Like 2/3 of the kids ended up just eating the marshmallow immediately. But then they followed those kids for like 20 years and 30 years.
Really?
Yeah. And they found that the kids that didn't eat the marshmallow immediately and had enough self-control actually ended up being more successful in every tier of life. So they scored higher in their SATs, they got better salaries, they were better in health, they had less alcohol and drug problems, they were more popular and social. So it was like self-control is the key to success. And what I learned from school was, so like my parents like would just be so on top of me with my education. They would be like, you have to get an A, you have to get an A, like B's are unacceptable. And what I learned very early, like when I was like 10 years old, I was like, if I just get A's, then my parents will stop yelling at me and I don't have to deal with them anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And like I can do whatever else I want. So what I did is I had enough self-control to just get A's, and I learned that very early on through education. And now that self-control now translates to entrepreneurship, where I'm able to focus for incredible amounts of time and do lots of things and have that self-control. And that's what contributes to success. Is if I had to tell you what to learn, it's the ability to have self-control. And we sort of talked about this a little bit already with the distractions, right?
Yeah, distractions, and then that's why I love, yoga and meditation. And like I've seen this abundance and this giant wave of realization. We're seeing like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, when they first met, one thing they attributed their success to was focus. And then you see like Steve Jobs, I know I'm picking out like big names, but any successful person or entrepreneur will say it. But Steve Jobs said like the ability to say no, so that self-control and that discipline will take you a long way.
Yeah.
And then I like to end it in like a rapid fire form, so I'm going to ask multiple questions here.
Sure.
So to start, what is your favorite place you have traveled to or you want to travel to?
Favorite place I have traveled to was recently I went to Cairo, Egypt to see the pyramids. And I went with my fiance right after our engagement. And it's incredible. I mean, it's really something to see. Everyone reads about the pyramids or sees pictures growing up. And when you see it in person, you're just absolutely mind blown as to how in ancient
just massive?
times. Yeah, it's just incredible that like people thousands of years ago were able to architect this somehow. And it's incredible that we still don't know how it was done. Elon Musk actually talks about that, which is, if you don't continue to progress technology, it'll eventually be forgotten or lost. And I know he's kind of a conspiracy person and has crazy thoughts, but it's interesting because we did actually lose that technology. We still don't know how they did it. So it's pretty cool.
That's true. And then I'm sure you're going to love this because I'm a book addict myself, but what is your favorite book recommendation to give to people?
Of course, it's my book, Self-Made Success. My favorite book recommendation that I like to give people is, this is a good one, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. So everyone knows How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He has this other book that I think is even better.
Under the radar.
Yeah, and it's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And it literally talks about living in the present moment without talking about it, without saying it's the power of now. It talks about how to get rid of anxiety, depression, and he was an amazing author. If you haven't read How to Win Friends and Influence People, read that one, but definitely read How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. I meet so many people that are so anxious about life and they're anxiety prone, especially being a doctor in dermatology. People are so anxious about their skin and the way they look. This will totally take away your anxieties and make you live a much richer, fuller life in the present.
I love that. And then is that also your favorite book? Because the next question is, what is your favorite book you've read?
Yeah, I would say it's between How to Stop Worrying and Start Living and The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Those are two top book recommendations that I have got to throw out there for the people. And then, so that's
and then what's a future book you really want to dive into and nerd out in?
Yeah, a future book is Actually, I just ordered it on Amazon. It's called The Little Book That Beats the Market. So I'm actually, learning more about investing and how to properly invest my assets, cash, protect it, learning more about, I think cash management is something that is super, super important, and it's a failure of the education system that they don't teach it to you in school. Even I did my MBA at Yale, and they didn't do much of it, and so I think it's important because of inflation and taxes can have such a big impact, because a lot of people can make money, but not a lot of people can manage it and save it appropriately. My goal in life I would love to just live off interest at some point, I think if you can figure that out. So I'm learning more about investing, and I've heard great things about this book called The Little Book That Beats the Market.
Awesome. And I've also been indulging in that as well. I'll send you, I got a free PDF version from Ray Dalio with his new book, Principles of Navigating Big Debt Crises. But I love Ray Dalio. Yeah. He's just so humble that not a lot of people know about him, but everything he says, just giving out his stuff for free, he's so smart.
I love it. Principles is amazing. He has a great video series that I watched.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, that was great. There's a reason he's a multi-billionaire, and he's just such a good guy and has all the right life principles, and his book's always number one on Amazon. Yeah, he's that's definitely that's a great. I actually, what's funny is I gave every employee at my company principles for Christmas. Because I thought it would be good for the company and team.
That's awesome. And I know it's sort of to the end here, but do you have, in his book he talks about radical transparency, do you have that within your companies as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So radical transparency is so important. The way that we are able to practically apply it at Prep Expert is we keep all of our project management in a Google Doc that everyone can see and edit everyone's work, etc. So you know exactly how many hours people are putting in, what kind of tasks they're doing, what kind of projects they're working on, and total transparency.
That's good. I gotta implement that in the future. That's great. And then the last staple question, in the way we end every podcast, is what is your big dream in life? One thing you really want to strive to achieve before you leave this earth, and the action items you're taking to get there.
Yeah, I think as what's interesting is your priorities change as you become older and you become more successful. So I think everyone sees it as like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, right? They've achieved pinnacles of success, and now they're really becoming philanthropists. So I think that's really the goal, is that you make enough money that you're comfortable and you're happy with life. That's kind of what I joked about living off interest. If you can eventually just have enough money coming in that you're comfortable, then you can help other people with your money. And I think that's the responsibility of very successful entrepreneurs, is to figure out how to help others in the most effective way possible, whether that's inspiring entrepreneurship or whether that's actually just providing water to people in Africa, right? So I think helping the world is at the heart of every business and every entrepreneur, is you've got to provide value and help people, and you get a lot. The most contentment that I get at my company, Prep Expert, is when I get emails from students about how many hundreds of points they improved on SAT or what college they got into. So it's helping people, right? So at the end of the day, whatever business in, whatever your service is, and you're helping people, you're providing value. And I think eventually you want to do that for almost free or likely free as a philanthropist, as Ray Dalio does, as Bill Gates does, as Warren Buffett does. And so I would love to be one of those uber successful entrepreneurs who can provide a great value to people in need at no cost eventually.
That's amazing. I really admire that.
Thank you.
That's great. And thank you again for coming on this podcast. I'm sure these people truly, love you now, get to know who you are. And
thank you for having me. I'm of course going to plug my book. If you want to learn more about sort of my entrepreneurship principles, I really poured my heart and soul into self-made success. It's my life sort of work, and it sounds like you've actually read some of it
Yes,
as well,
yes.
and I hope you liked it, and
Definitely.
hopefully the audience will as well.
Yeah, on that token as well, would you want to highlight one of the social media you use and maybe a place people can follow you?
Yeah, exactly. So my personal Instagram is @1 Shaan, SHAAN, and then the Instagram for my Self-Made Success book is @Self-Made Success Book for Instagram.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. And like Shaan said, you can check out his social media and his book. Both are in the footnotes, along with another link to check out a video about himself. And to wrap it up, and most importantly, bring it back to you, just like Shaan and I talked about in our conversation, we want you guys to be radically transparent with us. If there is something you like, don't like, love, hate, want us to improve on, want us to work on, any ideas you have, please be honest with us, because it only makes us better. And giving value to you guys starts with being the best we can possibly be, trying to embody our own slogan, improving ourselves to impact your lives. So please reach out on our social media. You can do so at Dream Big & Co. Even email us at dreambigandco@gmail.com. And if you would like to further check out everything we're working on for the newbies or people who haven't already, all of our links are in the footnotes. So I'd really appreciate if you would head over to there and check us out. But other than that, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you on episode number 21.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.